I want to address something that I also see in chat. Someone says that they like Unsafe Space, but I do not like any form of radicalizing and feel today's stream has that flavor. That's okay. You can disagree with the flavor of today's stream. You're still invited to be part of the community. Uh, I just want to. I've said this before, but I think I would encourage you, not you particularly, but anyone who is anyone who says anyone who is afraid of words like radicalization and extremism, those aren't philosophical words. Those are words of degree. Those are just degrees. That's like saying I don't like 10 because it's the highest on the dial. Okay, it depends what the dial is. So there's no such thing as like there's nothing bad about extremely healthy, right? Extremely moral. And it's the reason that the words radicalization or extremism have been vilified is because the ideologies to which they are referring are bad in and of themselves, but the people referring to those ideologies are afraid to talk about the bad aspects of the ideology or the bad beliefs, and so they just call them extremism or it's radical. There's nothing wrong with radicalization either. Being a radical is not necessarily a bad thing. It depends in what way you are a radical, right? Radically, you can be radically honest. That might not bother people around you, but there's nothing immoral about it. There's lots of things that there's people substitute moral judgments for these words that describe degrees, and degrees of things that's the infection of pragmatism. That's this idea that like, well, you can't do too much of that thing. Don't be extreme about your stance that we can't steal from one another. That's an extreme stance. Don't say we can never do it. There must be a compromise. You're extreme if you say you can't. Like, that's what I'm opposing specifically. Carrie might not agree, but that's fine.
Can I jump in here for a second? I just my take on that is different. If someone's saying that times that things seem radicalized right now, they have become radicalized. Can you pull up one of the links I sent you, Carter? Will you pull up the tweet that has the screenshots of Arthur Chu? Right. Arthur Chu, you guys may recognize, he's a former Jeopardy winner, and he's a leftist on Twitter who has quite a large following, and is, if you're on Twitter, you may be familiar with him. These are some screenshots of things that he tweeted after what happened at the Capitol. And the reason I'm bringing this up in response to that comment is because this is radicalization. I started seeing what you're about to see in these tweets. I started seeing this 4 years ago. It's a big part of what woke me up and got me to leave the social justice cult, was because I started seeing people on my side, presumably side. I still believed in the whole left-right thing. I still, I started seeing people on the left supporting physical violence, justifying it online, or actually engaging in it. I saw videos of people attacking Trump supporters physically and bloodying them, and mobs going after people. And I saw friends of mine on social media saying stuff like, people need to die. There's one that I quoted in my first essay about trying to grapple with this. It was called On Leaving the Social Justice Cult. And in that essay, I did a screenshot of a friend of mine who said, people need to die. And he had a whole list. He said Trump and Pence and Barron and he had all these Republicans on the list. And it was so crazy to me to see people calling for murder.
Right, but what makes that wrong isn't the radical part of it. It's what's being radicalized. It's the initiation of force that's wrong.
Right. But allow me to make this point. That woke me up. That is radicalization. And this, we can argue about what you mean by that word later. Just let me make this point. if you are saying, I'm talking to the normies here, or if you are saying this sounds what you guys are talking about, secession or what's possibly to come and trying to predict the future, that some of it sounds like radical things you're predicting. Well, yes, we are living in radical times. Look at these tweets. This is from a blue check mark on Twitter, on the left, and I don't think
You
I can
can't,
see them,
but
so you
the
tell me
first
when
one's
they're
up.
up.
The Ashley Babbitt feeding. Go ahead and read it if you
Yeah.
want.
So can you read some of? Don't read what she's saying. Will you read his
Sure.
tweets?
Uh, so the first one here says Ashley Babbitt feeding the worms is one of the few good things that happened as a result of the Capitol quote protest. And if you feel the need to mourn her Nazi ass, it'll be easier for both of us if you unfollow me. He seems nice.
So he's saying that the woman, the unarmed woman, the veteran who was shot by Capitol Police and died at the Trump protests is a Nazi, and that she deserves to die, and that she's worm food. Can you read some of the
Yep.
others?
So
I
underneath
have a
that, he
point to make,
says when a
notes.
bullet goes through the fatty tumor a Nazi has in the space where a human being would have a brain, nothing is lost. A pile of meat that moved and spoke and acted like a person was made to stop moving and thus could no longer fool people into thinking it was one of them. I can see why Jack Dorsey thinks this is completely normal and completely within Twitter's standards. The next thing he says is a Nazi is the opposite of a person, and therefore our morality to them must be reversed. To hate them is to love, to harm them is to heal, to kill them is to bring life. You should feel less bad than you do about putting down a rabid animal. In that case, the rabies virus and the host are separate identities. One was the victim of the other. A Nazi is the disease.
So this is a couple. I have a couple points to make about this, Carter. One, somebody in the chat says, "Who is this? Why is he so important?" He's not so important. He's just some guy with a bunch of followers. He's just some guy who was a Jeopardy champion and then amassed a bunch of followers.
Blue
And
check.
a typical he's a typical blue checkmark leftist who has a big following. And I'm just highlighting what he's saying because this is not isolated. This is not one person saying this. I started to see this kind of language and this kind of dehumanization of conservatives and of Republicans. I started to see it in 2016. It's part of what woke me up. I saw friends of mine calling all conservatives and Republicans Nazis and simultaneously saying it's okay to kill and punch Nazis. And by the way, all Trump voters are Nazis.
Right.
That's what was happening at that time, and it's only gotten worse. You can see it now in Arthur Chu's quotes. We're in this stage, and we've been in this stage for the past 4 years where they are using. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's not crazy. It actually makes sense to me that he is calling people Nazis while behaving like a Nazi and using Nazi tactics. This is what the Nazis did. They dehumanized people. This is what
Yep.
you have to dehumanize people before you can feel like it's okay and justified to
In
murder
fact, they
them.
used that
He's
exact
calling
metaphor, by the way,
her,
the parasites.
right, right. He's calling her a Nazi, which is not true. Since he's called her a Nazi, he thinks it's okay to call her a pile of meat. He says she's not a person.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think that he's just saying it about this one unarmed protester who happens to be a Trump supporter, that's not true. He's saying this about all Trump people, everyone who was there and everyone who wasn't. Anyone who is not in their cult, they see as being fair game for murder, for elimination. And I'm saying this because I'm not exaggerating. A lot of people on the left
Right.
believe this. They believe this. They think it's okay to kill and murder someone as long as you put the Nazi label on them, and they've put the Nazi label on anyone who isn't them. And so we are living in radicalized times. Like, things have gotten crazy. They are going to get crazier. The dehumanization is going to get worse. There's one other tweet I sent you just to hammer this home. This is the one from
All
James
right, let me
Lindsay.
find it. Yep. Let's see. I'll put it up. Okay. So he's commenting on a tweet from this guy Khalid Jabari, who I don't know. Do you know who Khalid Jabari is?
No,
Should I?
it doesn't matter.
Khalid's tweet. Khalid says, I posted this a lot early on, but it warrants repeating. Republicans are not our countrymen. They are terrorists and must be treated as such. Hashtag Capitol Riots, hashtag Trump. And then he shows what he previously posted, which is, it is no longer tenable to recognize Republicans as a political party, much in the same way that we fight to be anti-racist, do we? We must fight to make this country anti-Republican. The word Republican should give everyone the same gut reaction as words like rapist or murderer, disgust, revulsion, and horror. Republicans have fortified their right to be your countrymen. Or forfeited. That didn't make sense to me. Republicans have forfeited their right to be your countrymen. They no longer serve the American people, instead choosing to strip them of all their rights and torture them. We must make this country actively hostile to Republicans and conservatives, the same way they've made this country inhospitable to everyone else. When Republicans have been shamed out of society, America will find peace. And of course, James Lindsay says full dehumanization is coming. Full dehumanization mode is coming, which of course he's correct about.
Yes. So whether you like it or not, they do not view you as human. They do not view you as this guy says, if you're a Republican, you shouldn't even be considered a valid political party. But it goes beyond that. They don't view you as human, which is weird because they use that again. They engage in a lot of projection, and we've seen them a lot of times. If you disagree with some point that they have, they will say, your disagreement is you're trying to invalidate my very humanity, my very existence, which is insane. It's like, no, I'm just disagreeing with you, dude. But that's what they are doing here. They are, in fact, trying to deny your humanity if you are someone who's not one of them. If you don't share their ideology, you're fair game. They don't want you in this society. They don't want you alive. So this is where we've been heading slow. It didn't start 2020. It started way before 2016. I just didn't see it till 2016. I couldn't see it clearly. And every day there are more people seeing it clearly. And I'm sure Arthur Chu helped a lot of people see it very clearly, what they believe about you if you're not one of them. But we are living in radicalized times. So when you're living in crazy times, when you're living in an upside down world, you are going to hear things and predictions about what might possibly come to be. That it doesn't mean that I don't want them to come true. I don't want to see some civil unrest, but we are living in a time where over half the population is being dehumanized currently.
Okay, I don't disagree with anything you said except for your definition of radical. So and the reason I'm picking on this is because this is partly how they confuse issues by misdefining words. So I'm trying to channel Socrates, who would never let this people get away with. He was obsessed with definitions. Radical does not mean crazy. Radical and crazy are not the same thing. There's several definitions, but the one that's relevant here is there's 4 sub-definitions to the relevant one. A, very different from the usual or traditional. B, favoring extreme changes in existing views, habits, conditions, or institutions. C, associated with political views, practices, and policies of extreme change. And D, advocating extreme measures to retain or restore a political state of affairs. Now, none of those extreme, very, very different, those are all degree words. Those are all words of someone that wants something very different from what is going on now. It doesn't mean they want it through violence. It doesn't mean, like, if you were an Enlightenment values individual rights person living in the Soviet Union, you were a radical by definition. You wanted something radically different than what you were in. So what I'm saying is, to me, it's not just to me, it is very important to be careful with words and to use the words that you mean. Is it the radical thing that's bothering you? Or is there something deeper? Peel that radical label off. When you're just using words that are only gradations, that are only words that are telling you the amount of degree of something, peel those words off and get to the essence of what it is that you oppose to this. And what I oppose to what you just shared is not the, quote, radical nature. It's the blatant desire and expression that the initiation of the use of force with people you disagree with is exactly the right thing to do, that the state and other individuals have power to dehumanize and initiate the use of force against people. That is radical. It is extreme, but it's not its radical or extreme nature that makes it bad. It's the content that makes it bad, not the degree to which the content has been turned up. Does that make sense?
Sort of.
Well, we don't have to keep
I'm
going.
not really.
That's fine.
I don't care. I know what that person meant by radical, and they're not defining it the way you are. They did mean
I get
crazy.
it, but you gotta
right.
get back to definitions, because when you speak that stuff, it really, definitions matter. Definitions matter. We can't have conversations, and like, definitions really, really matter. So just take the time to think about. I misuse words all the time, but they encourage us to misuse those words. They want you, because they can label things radical or extreme without any analysis of them. Because those words don't require an ethical analysis. They're just degrees. So once they make that word bad, they just say that's an extremist thing. Done. Extremism is bad, right? So that's why it's dangerous. That's all.